Tonight, we are following a developing story that could reshape the balance of power on this planet. Right now, as you watch this broadcast, Chinese Coast Guard vessels are patrolling waters that Russia has considered its own for generations. This is not an invasion. There are no shots being fired. But make no mistake, what is happening in the Arctic may be the most significant territorial shift since the Cold War. And almost no one is talking about it. Good evening. I am bringing you exclusive coverage of what military analysts are calling a silent takeover in the frozen north. The Arctic has become a chessboard where superpowers are making moves that will determine who controls trillions of dollars in resources and the shipping routes of the future. Stay with me. What you are about to hear will change how you see the world map. According to AP News, Chinese Coast Guard vessels recently conducted joint patrols in Arctic waters alongside Russian ships. Russian state media celebrated this as a show of strength against NATO. But here is what they did not tell you. China is not an Arctic nation. Its nearest border sits approximately 900 miles from the Arctic Circle. So why are Chinese law enforcement vessels operating in waters that Russia has long treated as its private territory? The answer is simple and troubling. Russia is financially isolated. Western sanctions have cut Moscow off from the technology and capital it needs to maintain its northern dominance. Putin had no choice but to turn to the only partner willing to do business: Beijing. The Barents Observer has uncovered something even more alarming. Russia has opened its internal Arctic rivers to Chinese commercial shipping. These waterways run deep into the Russian heartland. For decades, they were considered sacred and untouchable, strictly off-limits to foreign vessels. Now, Chinese ships have navigation rights through the very veins of Russian territory. This is not a partnership between equals. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies are calling it a predatory relationship. China waited patiently for Russia to weaken, then stepped in to claim strategic assets at a steep discount. Russia is no longer the master of the Northern Sea route. It is becoming a toll booth operator for Chinese goods moving between Asia and Europe. Here is where this story takes a much darker turn. To sell oil to China under crushing Western sanctions, Russia is using what experts call a shadow fleet, old, poorly maintained, uninsured tankers that were never designed for Arctic conditions. These vessels lack the reinforced hulls needed to navigate through punishing ice fields. They are traveling through some of the most treacherous and dangerous waters on the planet. Consider the nightmare scenario that military and environmental analysts have wargamed extensively. One of these aging tankers strikes an iceberg. Thousands of tons of crude oil spill into pristine Arctic waters. Unlike the Gulf of Mexico, where oil eventually disperses, Arctic oil freezes into the ice. It persists for decades, poisoning the food chain. It devastates ecosystems that have remained untouched for thousands of years. Who bears the consequences of this reckless gamble? Russia. China gets the cheap oil delivered to its ports. Russia gets the environmental catastrophe that will poison its own coastline for generations. The question intelligence agencies are asking is not if a major spill will happen, it is when. While Russia and China have been making these strategic moves, the Western alliance has not been sleeping. NATO has responded with what defense officials are calling an ice wall. Look at Scandinavia on a map. For decades, it was a fragmented neutral zone. Sweden proudly stayed out of military alliances. Finland maintained careful diplomatic relations with Moscow. That era is over now. According to Breaking Defense, the Nordic nations have signed a historic defense agreement. Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark will now operate their air forces as a single unified command. The numbers are staggering when you add them up. Combined, these four nations field over 250 advanced fighter jets, including the formidable F-35 stealth aircraft. This unified force is actually larger than the air forces of major powers like the United Kingdom or France. For Putin, this represents a strategic catastrophe entirely of his own making. He invaded Ukraine to push NATO back from Russian borders. Instead, he pushed Finland and Sweden directly into the Western alliance. The Kola Peninsula, where Russia bases its critical nuclear submarine fleet, is now within minutes of flight time from this new Nordic air armada. The buffer zone Putin desperately wanted no longer exists. Russia operates the world's largest fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers, vessels that can smash through Arctic ice year-round. The United States, by comparison, has just 2 aging icebreakers. That gap defined Arctic power for an entire generation. Now that equation is finally changing. The United States, Canada, and Finland have formed an industrial alliance called Ice Pact to build next-generation polar icebreakers together. Finland brings world-class engineering expertise, the United States brings substantial funding, Canada provides modern shipyards. This represents a direct challenge to Russian and Chinese dominance in polar waters. If you are finding this coverage valuable, take a moment to subscribe and like this channel. Your support helps us bring you these critical stories that matter. Everything I have described so far happens on the surface, but the most dangerous dimension of this conflict is happening beneath the waves in complete silence. 97% of global communications travel through undersea cables running along the ocean floor. The Arctic is becoming a critical new highway for these essential cables. NATO intelligence has raised serious alarms about Russian vessels systematically patrolling these waters. Ships officially designated as oceanographic research vessels have been detected carefully mapping the exact locations of cables connecting Europe to North America and Asia. In a conflict scenario, Russia would not need nuclear weapons to cripple Western nations. Cutting those cables would crash global financial markets overnight. It would blind satellite communications. It would sever the digital connections holding the modern world together. This is hybrid warfare happening right now, in what military planners call the gray zone, where an accident might actually be sabotage and an innocent-looking fishing vessel might be a sophisticated spy ship. Svalbard is a Norwegian island group sitting in a strategically vital position. Due to a treaty signed back in 1920, Russia has the legal right to maintain a presence there. Russia operates a coal mining town called Barentsburg on Norwegian sovereign territory, but intelligence experts say they are not really mining coal anymore. The mines sit largely empty. So why do 400 Russians remain stationed there? Because Barentsburg functions as a perfect listening post, planted inside NATO's northern flank. From this forward position, Russian intelligence can monitor satellite signals, track Western missile launches, and potentially disrupt GPS communications across the entire region. Consider Novaya Zemlya. This remote archipelago is where the Soviet Union tested the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated in human history. For 30 years after the Cold War ended, the site remained silent and abandoned. But recent satellite images analyzed by Western intelligence agencies show alarming new activity. Heavy trucks, underground tunnels, construction cranes working around the clock. Russia is preparing this site for new weapons testing, developing Burevestnik, a nuclear-powered cruise missile theoretically capable of flying indefinitely. Putin is militarizing the Arctic by reviving the nuclear specter of the Cold War itself. China wants more than shipping routes. The Arctic contains an estimated $30 trillion in untapped resources: titanium for fighter jets, palladium for advanced microchips, rare earth elements essential for electric vehicle batteries. As permafrost melts due to climate change, these Russian resources become increasingly accessible. Beijing is methodically securing raw materials for 50 years of technological dominance, effectively transforming the Russian Arctic into a resource colony serving Chinese factories. We must acknowledge the human cost of this great power competition. The Arctic is not empty wilderness. Indigenous peoples, the Nenets, the Sami, and many others, have called this land home for thousands of years. Their traditional grazing lands are now being carved apart by new pipelines. Their ancestral fishing waters are increasingly polluted by shadow fleet operations. They are the silent victims of decisions made in distant capitals. Can this new Western alliance actually succeed? The challenge is unprecedented coordination. NATO has never attempted to defend the High North at this scale. The United States brings the nuclear umbrella, Canada brings crucial geography, Finland and Sweden bring hard-won Arctic warfare expertise, Norway brings sophisticated intelligence capabilities. For the first time, all the strategic pieces fit together coherently. The Arctic is no longer Russia's private backyard. it has become a contested global chessboard. Russia, badly weakened by its ongoing war in Ukraine, has been forced to sell strategic assets to China simply to keep functioning. A desperate fire sale of national sovereignty. Meanwhile, the West has finally awakened to the threat. The Nordic Alliance and Ice Pact represent the first genuine checks on Russian and Chinese ambitions in the polar region. The ice is melting faster every year. The stakes continue rising higher. And the battle for control of the top of the world has only just begun.